Hi, and welcome to the latest Sci-Fi author chat. Today I have with me Premee Mohamed. Hi, Premee.
Hi, Dan.
How are you doing?
Good, good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for coming on. I've been meaning to have you on five ever, so I'm very pleased you're here.
Thank you for the invite.
I'm just going to give an intro and then we'll just jump right in after that. So super casual, and I'll throw you a curveball question later. So today with Premee Mohamed, we have a magnificent author and scientist. So I will be digging into both angles there. And we have a guest behind Premee as well, a cat. So staring off into some alternate dimension. So Premee is the author of the upcoming short story collection, which I can't wait to get. No One Will Come Back for Us. Ooh, there it is. It's gorgeous. The Void trilogy. And what can we offer you tonight? The Annual Migration of Clouds, several other books and short stories galore. And you are a Nebula World Fantasy and Aurora Award-winning Indo-Caribbean scientist and speculative fiction author based in Edmonton, Alberta, in Canada. You're an assistant editor for the short fiction audio venue Escape Pod, which is fabulous, by the way, and author of Beneath the Rising series of novels, as well as several novellas. Your short fiction has appeared in many venues, and you can be found on Twitter at Premeesaurus and on your website, www.premeemohamed.com. We'll go into that later. So I would love to ask you about how did you know, or at least suspect you wanted to write science fiction?
Oh, geez. I've always loved sci-fi. I grew up watching, the Star Trek reruns on TV. I liked Star Trek: The Next Generation. I liked a lot of like sci-fi type cartoons, like anime, and I liked Astro Boy. I had all these Astro Boy clothes and an Astro Boy wallet, and there's
Nice.
so many photos of like little Premee with my parents being like, oh, with me in an Astro Boy shirt. I was interested in, when you're a little kid and you have a tough time telling what's real and what's not real and what could be real, but adults aren't letting you access them.
Yeah.
So I just took it to mean that all the technology that I was seeing, robots and spaceships and things like that, were absolutely real. But for safety reasons or something, the adults in my life were not letting me have it.
I love it.
And as I got older, it was a little disappointing to realize that, okay, some of this isn't real. And then I got a little older still and was like, some of it's not real yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that I think was what really drew me to sci-fi is the possibilities, the potential, the questions that are being asked about the unintended consequences of all these interesting sci-fi technologies and ideas and systems and changes to infrastructure and ideas.
And that's happening in real time very quickly lately, it seems like to me, with an acceleration on several levels, both life science and computer science as well. So
Yeah, it's funny because and I know you write sci-fi too, so we both probably have that feeling of having like an amazing sci-fi idea and working on the story, and then the next week someone's like, "We just did that in the lab," and you're like,
thanks. I
"Can
mean,
you not?"
wait till after the book is out. No.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I subscribe to a lot of these sort of breaking science news things because I'm also
Mm,
a science writer. And so I'm getting inundated with all this new tech, and I'm going, good Lord, how do we keep ahead as sci-fi writers? Because in the past, we've been able to project pretty far, and now it seems like
mm.
these breakthroughs are just, they're on our heels, which good, but also, oh,
Also, yeah, as someone writing fiction, we're like, our stuff stops being fiction virtually instantly. And you read stuff from like the 60s and 70s where they're like, hang on, I will just have a video call with this person. And
right.
that everyone back then was like, oh, cool idea. And now, of course, it's everyday stuff. But for us, if we're trying to extrapolate, you know, 50, 70, 90, 100 years into the future, we can't do that anymore because all that stuff is happening in like 2 weeks.
Right. So, kind of digging into that, how do you think your science background informs your science fiction? Because you have a degree in molecular genetics and in environmental science as well. So
Yeah.
you're kind of like me because I have the sort of biotech and the ecology side. So that's very interesting to dig into this with someone else with that similar background. I'm just
Yeah,
wondering how you kind of pluck
it's
those
tricky.
threads.
I think particularly in the biotech sense, where my stories find themselves going is not so much with the tech itself, but with changes around the ethics related to it.
Yeah.
So we already know we can clone animals. Obviously, you can extrapolate that to clone humans. You can use CRISPR technology to help cure diseases or prevent the effects of them from affecting people. You can affect epigenetics and flick things on and off. And um, it's not that the premise itself would be sci-fi and the things I have planned next. It's that the laws around them have changed.
Yeah.
So everything that's not allowed now or seems iffy now or questionable now would be allowed later. And I think that's something that's kind of going to be the case for a lot of sci-fi. It's not so much that the sci-fi tech itself is going to be so new and interesting. It's that the systems that sprout up around it and its use are going to be so interesting. I mean, even just looking at AI systems now, and us looking at AI writing copy for websites because we're at Chat GPT 4. Um, and I think I was tweeting about this the other day. What's Chat GPT 7 going to look like?
Exactly.
What's 12 going to look like? What's 30 going to look like? At what point do we get things like somebody going to their, language learning or their neural network program and saying, I want to make a video game. I want you to look at the top 500 most popular, best rated video games of the last 20 years and synthesize all that information. And then I want you to make me a game. And, people are going to buy the game because it'll have everything in it that they love, nothing they don't love. They won't care that it's not by a human.
Yeah,
Just
exactly.
because that's not happening right now that we know of
Right.
doesn't mean
Right.
it wouldn't happen or that person wouldn't be making $1 billion very shortly. And then what happens, what are governments going to do with these neural networks? What are organized crime going to do with it? What are terrorists going to do with it? These are all the kind of legal and societal questions that I think sci-fi is better positioned to ask in fiction than to discuss the tech itself. Even though the tech itself is kind of the focus of a lot of earlier sci-fi.
Right.
She's waving her hands as if that made any sense.
No, that does make sense. Because like we as sci-fi writers have projected like oftentimes both the good and the bad consequences of technology that seems to have limitless potential, and then it comes, I know like we write a little bit of blurred lines, or at least I do, in terms of blurring a little bit of magic in sci-fi, because magic being, technology that we can't describe yet or don't have yet or whatever, or don't understand. And, with AI, you wonder like, how far is it going to get ahead of us beyond like singularity point? And these are our new gods or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting time to be a writer of science fiction.
It is interesting. Yeah. It seems more interesting than earlier. And I know people back then probably thought that as well, but it's like if you went to somebody who was writing sci-fi in like 1935, say, and asked them to predict the sci-fi disasters of technology, not even 100 years later, but like 60 years later, 50 years later, they would have been wrong on every single thing.
Yeah.
Like everything. And that suggests to me that if you ask us what disasters are coming in the future or what interesting tech that could benefit us or destroy us, we don't know either.
No, and
like, we can't even predict. Yeah.
Points, like we had the atomic age, and then we have computing, and so now it's AI. So we're on the cusp of this whole new thing. And with regards to biotech, I feel like we're in the same boat.
Oh, yeah.
Something's definitely cooking with that, that's going to be the next thing that we don't quite even realize yet. So fascinating time and ironically hard to write about from a science perspective, because that's being siphoned up by copywriting stuff too. So you're like,
what am I write about? Yeah. And then
work?
part of you is like, if I make something up and I write about it, and something comes out in the gap between me writing about it and it being published, am I going to get sued?
Well, no, I see. I know there's a lot of those ethical questions, but there's no way. I don't think, like, what are we like? We're doing what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. what
we're
else can we
trying
do?
to
Yeah.
protect that next thing. And, I think that it becomes a challenge, right, to kind of work in that space. But it's a good challenge because I feel like we don't have we'll never be stagnant in terms of,
Yeah.
right? We're having to be on our toes. We're having to push and push and push at what we think is possible or
Yeah.
impossible.
Well, and something you said there made me think too. Part of it too is the communication system, like science communications. So I know you're a science writer, so you do SciComm, but sometimes I'll get one of these newsletters and it'll contain, a piece of good news or something really obscure and interesting, like
Right.
scientists have discovered this catalyst that very, very simply turns X into X. This could solve part of our recycling problem for this specific stream, and you get very excited. Why can't we scale this up? How come people don't know about this? Why isn't there a startup? They've been doing this research for 5 years. Where's the facility changing this crap into
Yeah.
this useful material? And nobody knows. It's
Nobody
stuck
knows.
there in the Journal of Chemical Engineering.
Yeah, and I see that a lot. I'll see like, oh my God, this is great news. Sometimes
This
I'll
is
tweet
so
about it,
cool.
but it'll be,
Yeah.
but most people are not going to see that. And it's a shame because there's so much, the buzzwords are also drowning out real science that is really going to
Yeah.
help us and our planet.
Yeah.
I'm like, can we
Like
just,
we are on the verge of literally eliminating guinea worm from Africa. That is huge news.
it is a big deal.
That's
I
going
saw
to have
that.
such
Yeah.
a big
Yeah.
impact on people's lives and livelihoods and their children and their education and their everything. And people aren't yelling about it. I yell about it, but I don't get invited to a lot of parties.
I know. Well, there's that. But like, I feel like maybe
They're
we
like,
start our own parties, right? Like we're like,
yeah, they're like, go stand over by the chips and don't talk. I'm like, okay.
no, man, let's have a science party. Maybe that's the trick. Maybe it just takes us chipping away at stuff that we think is really cool. Because
Yeah.
if we don't share it,
Well,
that's
I
for
actually
people that will
included the
know.
guinea worm thing in one of my novels. The main character, Johnny Chambers, who's a scientist, says that they, aside from all the other diseases that she's eliminated with her labs and stuff, she's like, we did eliminate guinea worm. I'm like, yeah, I'm throwing that in there. No one's gonna care. Nobody said anything about it, but I threw it in there anyway.
Awesome.
Made it through all the copy edits and stuff. So
That's great. Well, so I'm curious, like, when you started out, you've written a lot of books, some of which have not been published, right?
oh yeah.
Yeah. So you and I have been writing forever, and this is just
Yeah,
what we do, and it's a sickness. No.
it is. Maybe someone will cure us.
Well, at what point did you decide this is the one I'm going to send out? I'm going to submit this. Let's see what.
Oh yeah, no, I'm
Yeah.
that's a typical story because I a bunch of people, a bunch of friends. So the problem with becoming a writer is that you make friends with all these writers,
Yeah.
and then they start like nudging you gently to do stuff. They're like, maybe you should submit to this venue. Maybe you should write a story about this. Maybe you should do this. And some of them eventually were like, you've got a bunch of short stories out there. We know you've got a novel sitting around somewhere. Why not try to get literary representation and get your novel published? And I was like, what are you? So I went digging through my trunk and I found a novel that I liked-ish, but that was done. So a lot of the stuff in my trunk is truly unbelievably long, but also not finished.
Yeah, I get that.
I never had the knack of ending a story. I was a pantser anyways, and I just wanted to make up my little people and make them go on little adventures, like my action figures.
Yeah.
And so I'd end up with like 400,000 words of people going on adventures and eventually be like, didn't I leave somebody in like a cave? Like several notebooks ago? Like, I wonder if that guy's okay. I'd lose track of people, I'd lose track of plot points. People would just sit down and have conversations for like half a notebook.
It's fun.
Or like half a floppy disk or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was so much fun. This was my favorite hobby. Like,
right.
And those were all terrible. And I was like, these are all literally unpublishable. None of them have the word "the end" at the end. Beneath the Rising actually did. So I was like, hey, guess what? Guess what's going to happen to you? Yeah. So I gave it a little polish, and that's the one that because I finished it when I was 20. So I was like, this is going to be garbage. It was not garbage, but it did need cleaning up in terms of like a copy edit and like a proofread.
Yeah.
So I polished it up and I was like, I'm gonna query you. Let's see what happens, because all the stuff that I'm working on in the future is like this. It's fusions of sci-fi and fantasy and horror and some alternate history and whatever else I can think of to like cram in there. So if anything of mine should get repped, it's the representative one. And then that one did.
Awesome.
So that's how that one got chosen.
Well, that's lucky for us. So
Yeah, I guess so.
cool. That's awesome. I love hearing that. That's a positive experience and a note to us that even if we have stuff in our closet somewhere, stuffed in a notebook, get it out,
Get it out.
Get it
It's
out in
not
the world.
bad. Like well, there was that Twitter thread the other day saying, do you cringe when you read your own old stuff? And I'm like, yeah, but there's always good in the old stuff as well.
Exactly.
And even if that's simply the joy I felt at creating these characters or the world, or remembering that I was, working through a tough patch while I was writing this story. Even if that's all there is, there's not just cringe. How can anything be just cringe?
I mean, maybe if it's intentional, because I do like to write intentional cringe once in a while for the soul,
I think I've only ever written unintentional cringe, but there's a lot of it.
The more the merrier, I say.
Yeah.
So let's talk about you've got your novels and you've got this great collection. So can we talk about the collection? It's coming out soon.
Yeah.
No One Will Come Back for Us. Can we see that beautiful cover again?
Yes.
Ooh, sinister yet beautiful.
Sinister and wiggly. I'm sure that astronaut will be fine.
Totally
I'm sure
fine.
he'll be fine.
Totally not snacks.
Space snacks. He's like space ice cream.
This is a collection of stories. Is there a connectivity? Is there a through line for them, or are they all quite?
They're not linked. Several of them are in the same universe, which I didn't realize until I was pulling them together. So
yep.
which is amazing, and I could see that's happened to you as well. You're like, oh,
me, and I was like, oh, whoops, okay.
Oh, whoops, yeah. And cool. People afterwards who were like, I saw all these commonalities. I'm like, yeah, oh yeah, so I did that on purpose. Yeah, so the editor actually reached out to me and my agent, basically being like, hi, can I have a short story collection? Awesome. And the theme is dark fantasy, horror / weird. I don't want any overt sci-fi. I don't want anything fun or light or whimsical. No happy endings or whatever. Or no like unambiguously happy endings. Ambiguous ones are fine. And I was like, okay, so that's what's going to shape, I guess, what I pick. So I went through my stories and I picked out, I just went through chronologically and I picked out 18 and I sent them to him in chronological order and he ended up kicking one out. And I was like, that's totally fine because that still leaves us with 17 stories. And the editor put them in the order that he wanted. And all I asked was that one story that I wanted to end the collection was at the end. And 2 stories, there was one that should ideally be after the other because they're happening at the same time, but they have some characters in common.
Yeah.
So in the first story, you'll see a name mentioned. And in the second story, you'll be like, oh, it's that guy. Ah,
cool.
Kind of. Yeah. So that I thought was the only thing unifying the stories was this kind of like darkness and this, these are the horror stories. But later on, going back through it for an interview, I was like, so it looks like I come back to the same things, huh? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm gonna make a note of that because I didn't realize I was doing it.
I think that's really cool. It's sort of just sort of weird sort of chemistry that happens with these stories.
Yeah, it's like alchemy. Like you put everything into the pot and then what you get out looks different every time, but it's got the same ingredients in it, which is
alchemy is the better word. Yep, agree. That's so cool. Yeah. So when is this coming out again?
Officially May 16th. Unofficially, it's been in a bunch of bookstores for like 2 weeks now.
Awesome. Who's the publisher?
I've seen people with like, oh, that's Undertow Publishing.
Undertow Publishing, great.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm seeing people with like holding up their paperbacks, and I'm like,
outstanding. Ooh, I can't wait to have it.
Yeah, I hope you enjoy.
I am very excited for multiple reasons, and I'm gonna see, like, especially I've got my own collection out, but that was my first. But I really am curious this sort of alchemy, like how is it? Because I love Ray Bradbury's story collections. I guess
Mhm.
powerfully influential, but I want to see how other writers sort of make this sort of nebulous universe, you know.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Now I have to ask though, like, what are you currently working on? Like, what's next? What can
Oh, well, I have a piece of, you can't see it, I have a piece of paper taped up here showing all the things that I'm supposed to be working on. But the main thing is I have 2 sequels coming out for a novella that I had published in 2021, The Annual Migration of Clouds, that won the Aurora Award.
yes, wonderful.
So I'm very excited for that. And that it was actually quite gratifying because a lot of people were contacting both me and my editor saying, "Hey, we really loved this. Does the story go on? Is there going to be a sequel?" And for the longest time, I was like, "No, they bought 1 book." And then they came back to me and my agent and were like, so can we have like another one? And then can we have another one after that?" And I was like, "No, I haven't thought of anything." And they're like, "If we give you some money, can you think of something?" I'm like, "Yes,
That's a better arrangement.
that is a better arrangement." Yeah, because I hadn't planned on sequels. I planned on leaving that ending just completely open, like as open as the sky.
Awesome.
Nobody knows what happens next. And then it turns out people did want to know what happens next. And I was like, I got to come up with something. That's the main thing. And I just handed in edits on a novel that's coming out next year called The Siege of Burning Grass, which is a weird military fantasy with giant bugs.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, coming out from Solaris in 2024. And also in 2024, I have a novella coming out from Tor.com called The Butcher of the Forest, which is, I was about to say folk horror, but nobody in a folk horror that's part of the inside community thinks it's a folk horror. It's only the people coming in from outside. So this is, it's a horror set in a forest.
Love it.
And they're not fairies. Don't call them fairies. Don't call them the fae. They're just the people that live in the woods.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that's yeah. There's novels and novellas coming out, and then I just had a couple of short stories come out in anthologies. There was one in the Life Beyond Us anthology.
Cool.
I'm looking forward to reading that whole anthology because they paired each story with an essay by a scientist.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, I loved it. And they also, they put you in touch with the scientist, and the scientist interviews you. You interview the scientist.
Wow.
So I got some information from him about, some things in my story, and he got some information from me. And his essay is about space agriculture. And mine's kind of like my story, and it's The Far Side of the Door is kind of like a medical mystery about people getting sick on an uninhabited planet. And so it's this very fat, like it's this very, very thick, fat anthology. And I just want to go through it and read all the stories and essays. I'm very excited.
Ooh, that sounds really fabulous.
I'm super excited. Yeah, and of course the artwork on it's beautiful. And The Other Side of Never, which was edited by Marie O'Regan and Paul Kane, which is a Peter Pan, a dark Peter Pan
yes,
anthology. Yeah, and my story is called Never Was Born His Equal. And yeah, there's other stuff coming out. I'll have a story coming out in Apex's Robotic Ambitions.
Groovy.
Story. I'll have one coming out from the Playlist of the Damned, which is the premise of that one is that some hikers find a cassette tape in the woods, and it's got all these horror songs on it. So it's a story to go with each one that's inspired by music. So I'm excited for that one.
That's fantastic. Ooh, that one's really fun.
Yeah, that one's going to be fun. I can't wait to see what people do for that one.
Yeah. Is there a cover for that one yet?
Yeah, I believe so, actually.
Right,
it's on their Kickstarter, which has something ridiculous, like 25 days left or something.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a great cover. Very, very, very like horror pulp. And I also have a story coming out in Wilted Pages. And I don't even remember where that's coming out from. There's a lot of short stories.
Fantastic. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks.
So, like leaning into that, like what's your typical productive writing day?
Well, yeah, now that I'm out of work, typical productive writing day is I spend a couple of hours in the morning freaking out about being out of work and reading and not job hunting because I'm still extremely burnt out. But usually then after that, it's picking one or two things to work on that I'm on deadline for. For instance, right now I have a novella due on the 30th. So I was working on that yesterday because I haven't really sort of like written it. Yeah. I should be able to finish it for the 30th though, because I put 6,400 words on it yesterday.
All right.
But
Good deal, you got this.
yeah, I've got. But yeah, my quote process unquote. I have two monitors generally. This is the one I'm drafting on. This is the one that has a couple of tabs open usually. The outline, research, music, whatever else I might need is over on the other monitor if I need to look at that for reference. And notebooks to get me unstuck if I get stuck.
Great.
So if I ever do get stuck, I switch to longhand for a little while.
That works for me too.
Yeah, it's it really helps. And I, scribble or draw or whatever. And
yeah, same.
I use stickers or or I get up and go for a walk and come back.
Here.
Yeah, I think it's
really
just
cool ink, right?
Yes. Hang on. Okay, so you can see the little carousel in the back. Yeah, so that's some of my ink collection. And yeah, some of it that I've got in pens right now is just kind of sitting on top of my monitor riser. And I've got friends to hold pens for me.
Oh yes, look at
that little pen holder.
Love it.
A friend sent me a couple of these, and she was like, "I don't know anything about anything, but I know that you like fountain pens, and you need a friend to hold your new pen." She was like, the crab doesn't have a name, unfortunately.
Good friend though.
Good friend though, yeah. Because she was like, I went to the pen website and I found them on chat, and I was like, I want to buy my friend a pen to cheer her up. What do you suggest? And I was like, that's literally what you did, because I did not expect this at all. Thank you.
Aww.
Yeah.
Love it.
And by coincidence, she picked one with a medium nib, so I can put sparkly inks in it.
Excellent.
Sparkles. Yes.
I just got mildly off topic, but sort of related. I just got a bunch of metallic acrylics, and so I've been embellishing.
Nice.
I do watercolor cards for my patron.
Yeah.
And pen and ink, but I got these metallic acrylics, and I've been embellishing the watercolors and stuff.
Nice.
Man, I love metallic inks and
me too. I love. Oh, hang on, you can't see. I got like pack of these sparkly gel pens. Ooh. They are the most sparkly things I've ever seen in my life, and they're a different color if you write on white paper or black paper. I'm obsessed with them. This is the second pack I've bought because I used up all the ink in the other pack.
I may have to get some of those.
Yes, you do have to. I also buy them for friends. Like I'll buy them. Well, I have a job. I would buy them for friends, and they're so sparkly and opaque. Ooh. As soon as you start using them, you will not be able to stop.
Okay, I'm in.
I'll send you a link later, but yeah.
Nerding out over
right back. Disaster.
Yep, disaster. All italics, bolded, underlined.
Yep.
So, like, you've got all this great stuff coming. You've got the horror, the sci-fi, the fantasy intermingling in between and all over. But I'm curious if you have like a dream sci-fi writing project.
I do. I'm actually working on it very slowly right now. It's a spin-off of one of my sci-fi short stories. And it's enormous in scope, but the problem is it's also something I haven't written before, which is a mystery.
Ooh, fun.
Yeah, so I'm having to do all this research and like call friends and be like, okay, I have some questions about this and this, and like, can you put your husband on? I know he works in law enforcement. And then the problem with it being a sci-fi and being set, the plan is about 40 years from now. I'm like, well, all this information that I'm getting is good. How are things going to change?
Yeah.
And how can I incorporate that into the story without basically without breaking the story or creating plot holes? Because, for instance, if I'm writing a story right now and I'm like, there's this and this and this, how do we know that in 5 years, law enforcement won't just have a law enforcement AI that assembles all these, enormous amounts of data, more data than any human could ever look at, and pulls it together and says, that guy did it.
Yeah.
Like, that breaks my story. Unless something goes wrong with the AI, which is a different story than what I'm trying to write.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah, and I don't want to recreate Nick Harkaway's Gnomon because that happens in there. I don't know if you've read Gnomon, but it's also sci-fi and fantasy and horror, arguably. But yeah, and it's got a law enforcement AI, it's got a surveillance AI, and it picks up information from all over the world, and it helps solve problems. It's a very helpful AI. So I've got all of this stuff on the minds, and I'm like, this is hard. This might be a book that I have to like wait 2 or 3 years to try to like level up to
Hmm.
write. I don't know if you ever get that feeling where you're like, I had an idea. I am not the writer for this idea yet.
Yeah, I think
I will
like
write this idea later.
kind of in a way, I guess in some ways it's more like where am I at the moment? Not that I couldn't do it, but like how much can I put into it? How much energy?
Yeah,
And if it just is, I kind of just have to give it some breathing room and then come back,
yeah,
but you can absolutely do this. So
yeah. Well, I think with mine, what's overwhelming me is the amount of research because I don't want to
yeah, I could get that.
put something in there that also breaks the story.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
and it's like, and then you fall down rabbit holes, and then you get lost in the rabbit hole, and you're like, maybe if I put in this and this and this, and now I'm like, I don't want this to be a 350,000 word book. I
Right.
want it to be about 120,000 words. So some of this stuff can't fit, and yeah, it's a lot.
Right. Like, I think that when you have like a big high concept thing, you know, that at what point what do you whittle out and what do you keep,
Yeah,
that's kind of tricky. I'm in
it
that
is
right
tricky.
now actually with what I'm writing at the moment.
Yeah,
So because it's sort of near future,
yeah,
but it's not super far. And like, the technology is also becoming kind of my stumbling block because
yeah.
something could sway it one way. So I have to kind of fudge it a bit, be like, well, okay, I'm just going to assume that this part of AI is already there,
Yeah,
but the other part either isn't or it's not used for that, or
yeah,
it's whatever, it's disapproved of, who knows, made
or
it
something.
or something.
Yeah, the human factor is what I always find most difficult in these stories because part of you is like, I need the story to go a certain way, but that means that humans have to react to the technology in a certain way.
Right.
And how do I make it look natural? How do I make it feel believable to the reader? It's like for that Apex anthology, which is called Robotic Ambitions. The focus is on kind of um, what do what do robots want? Are we going to distinguish between a robot and like an AI? Are we going to say that AI is actual, artificial general intelligence? Are we going to say that it's just a language learning model or a neural network? Are we going to say what is intelligence? What is humanity? And so I'm trying to come up with ideas for the story, and I'm like, I don't want to write an AI takes over the world story. They're going to get a
Yeah.
million of those.
Yeah.
I'm a solicited author, so they just might say no to my story if they get a million other stories where other people did it well. But it's like, how do you incorporate the human factor appropriately and believably and respectfully in these stories that are fundamentally about an intelligence that is not like ours and cannot be expected to be like ours?
Right.
It's
Right.
hard.
It is hard. Like you have to take, because you're writing about something that needs bias to be addressed, and you have to try to
Yeah.
put your own bias, and then it's like, well, how do I
Well, now how do I fix the bias? Yeah.
break
Well,
the
it's like one of the ideas that I came up with early on and discarded was a kind of legal AI. So the legal AI judges cases and it makes things much faster for people that are going through the legal system
yeah,
because it looks at all the evidence impartially and it looks at previous cases and previous judgments and the law, like the actual written letter of the law, and then it passes down a judgment onto you. And then I was like, okay, here is the problem with this. Humans wrote those laws,
yep,
and they are discriminatory fundamentally for that reason. And
implicit
also, if it's
bias.
looking at legal precedent, which is the way that we currently make judgments, then that's all biased as well. Even if it's looking at something like incarceration rates, those are all the result of human bias. The populations in there, what people were arrested for, the sentences that were handed down, all of that is now being fed into the AI. So we haven't created an impartial AI just because we gave it all that data. We created an ultra biased AI.
Right, right, exactly.
So I was sitting there, I'm like, do I want to write a story where we address the bias? Do I want to write a story where the AI is genuinely unbiased? Do I want to write a story where the AI realizes that it's biased and tries to correct it? Eventually I just hucked it out. I'm like, this is too hard. I am going to write something unrelated to the legal system. I was asking questions I couldn't answer in a 4,000 word short story.
Well, this brings up a couple of things. So like, how do you know, like when you get to the point where you're spinning too much, is that where you're like, I can't do this, or like, yeah,
Where I'm pedaling really, really hard, but I'm not getting anywhere. Yeah, I think, and you've been writing for a while too, so you probably know the feeling, like when you just suddenly lose all resistance on your bike pedals and you're like, uh-oh, now I'm gonna die. Yeah, but it's also, you feel when the chain comes off and it's not productive anymore.
Yeah.
And you feel like you're not making any progress. And even if you pedal harder, you're not moving.
Yeah.
So when my mental bike turns into a stationary bike, I'm like, you know what, this idea doesn't have legs at this time. I'm setting it aside.
Yeah.
But if I start pedaling on another idea and I'm asking myself questions that I can answer in the 4,000 word plot, then we're good.
Yes.
So it's basically, it's intuition, kind of. It's something that I've had to A, learn, but B, also pick up really fast on with solicits, because then they give you the theme and they tell you what they want the story to be about. So you have to pedal on a track and they've given you the track. Man, this analogy is falling apart, but you know what I mean, right?
No, I do actually. There's a story due, very soon that I was solicited for, and so
Yeah.
I'm writing within that framework, and I'm going, I have to somehow figure this out before the 3,000 word limit. I think this is require maybe going back. And so I think, one thing to tell writers who might eventually do this is that don't get discouraged, that this is normal, that it's normal to question,
totally normal.
Am I writing what I should be writing here? Do I need to rework this? And not to beat yourself up over it or become discouraged. It is tiring to set aside something you put a lot of time into, but at the same time, it's rejuvenating to know that you can always come up with more ideas, but you have to get them down. You do have to actually.
Well, that's like my whole ideas folder in my Google Drive. Like there's like 1,900 files in there, and most of them are like a single sentence where I got cool vibes off something, or I came up with a premise.
Do that.
And there's no setting, there's no characters, there's no plot.
It's just a vibe.
It's just a vibe, and I will maybe write that later when the vibe returns to me, or maybe I won't. But the idea is the easiest part of it, and I wrote it down. So that's all that matters. Like, I have like 50 new ideas a day. I only write down 5 to 10 of them. So
I just have like, I kind of feel like I have so many ideas like you that I'm like, okay, wait. They're so
wait. Yeah.
They're like all these little fireflies blinking on and off all over the cloud. And I'm like, I actually just need to go over where that candle is. And
especially when you're on deadline and you're writing away and you get hit by another idea and you're like,
it's almost
I can't fit that idea into this story. That should be its own story. I'm gonna go write that. Wait, no.
It's kind of like a chain reaction happens whenever you're on deadline. They're like, your brain is like, oh, really? You wanted to just do this one thing?
What do you mean you've only got a week left to finish this? And it wants you to chase after the shiny new idea because it's shiny and new, and you're like, but they're paying me for this one. Brain, don't you want money for food? And the brain's like, no, I want to write the shiny new idea. Let's starve. Let's write the shiny new idea.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
No, because this is a business, and we do.
It's a business. And also, and again, this is a terrible business for an inveterate people pleaser. Like, if I told somebody I would give them something, I'm going to knock myself out to give them something. I am going to grind myself into a smear on a slide to give them something. Because I said I would, because I signed the contract.
It's your integrity. Yeah.
And also a small amount of money generally. And you tell that to my brain. My brain's running around in there. It's like, ideas. Yeah, you probably, I don't know if you can't see back there, there's also a little tiny like clear plastic box next to the carousel.
Yeah,
that's got like 1,500 index cards in it, and each of those has an idea as well. Maybe one day those will get written too. Like on my Patreon, I do writing prompts every month, and I've had a couple of people message me. They're like, you can't just give away your ideas like that. I'm like, yes, I can.
Yeah, you had just
Like,
endless
you
ideas.
can just give them to
Really
people.
okay, you know.
It really is okay. Like if I'm giving away 40 or 50 ideas a year, that still leaves literally, not metaphorically, literally thousands
Right.
that I still have in the vault, and probably the hundreds that I've come up with in the meantime that won't leave me
Meantime,
alone.
yeah. Okay, so it's curveball time.
Oh, curveball. Uh-oh.
Kind of related to stuff we've been talking about, but I like to ask this of every science fiction writer because generally you know what I'm talking about. So, what's the one thing that would tip people off to either you're being human or a replicant, like a reverse Voight Kampf test? Like, how would people know, first of all, whether or not
How would
this
people
is
know?
definitely preemie or this is definitely a replicant? How would
They would definitely know it was me, by my reaction to seeing any kind of bug photos or videos. Because a replicant would have taken the average of everybody else's responses in his programming to be like, oh, gross, kill it with fire. And I would be like, it's a friend. It's a bitey
you
friend.
know,
We're not gonna touch the friend. We're gonna put a pot lid over it. But look at the friend.
yeah, here's my cup and my glass. Hi,
Exactly. Okay,
friend.
bye. Yeah, because
Well, then now they know.
replicants have soft spots, but they have soft spots mostly, I think, for each other and for giving beautiful speeches in the rain.
Ooh,
And I don't think they have soft
snow.
spots for bugs.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
that was
like,
a curveball though.
but if people thought what would be something, some aspect of you that people might be like, you know what, actually,
Oh,
you
actually, she
are
might
for
be a
sure a
replicant.
replicant.
Possibly, possibly eating snacks with chopsticks so I don't get like powder on my fingers.
Ooh, I love it actually.
Yeah, because an American friend sent me a bag of those Frank's Red Hot goldfish,
Oh God.
which are incredible, and we can't get them up here.
Really?
They're the best snack I think I've ever tried. Like they're the genius combination of like crunchy and cheesy and like vinegary and salty.
Yeah.
And however, the powder on them isn't not spicy. And if you touch your eyes or your nose,
Not kid stuff.
it's
Yeah.
not cool. Yeah. So,
Clever.
and
All
now
right.
I'm just like I'm eating everything with chopsticks now, and the cat looks at me like I'm nuts, which is great.
Okay,
I don't
so
know where
like,
he went. He went off to sulk because I'm not paying attention to him.
oh dear. Well,
Oh, poor bug.
so like, what are some of the, you mentioned some of the influences in terms of shows and movies. Like if you were to like pick, like I want to extend this universe, which one would you want to go play it?
Godzilla. Yeah, I'm obsessed with the Godzilla monster universe, with the Monarch universe, and it's funny because I've always said, I have all these plans actually for Godzilla books and for Godzilla monster books.
Mm.
I've had outlines in there since I was in like high school. They were all sitting there on my Google Drive in a folder marked Godzilla, and I've never assumed that I was the correct person to write those because it feels culturally appropriative. Because not only is Godzilla Japanese, but he's so Japanese and he's such an important representative and extension of what happened to Japan at the end of World War II and the kind of collective psyche and response to the only country that's ever been bombed with nuclear weapons as an act of war.
Yeah.
And I am profoundly not the right person to write a Godzilla book. And then a couple of months ago, I saw somebody very excitedly trumpeting their giant Godzilla kind of encyclopedia book, and it was a white guy. And I was like, fine. But far be it from me to judge the book. I haven't read it. Maybe it's like perfect, but I still think that would have been more appropriate for a Japanese person to write or a team
Yeah.
of Japanese writers to write. Not that guy, no matter how big of a fan he is.
Yeah, I get it, and that's something like, when I'm writing, so like cryptids and kaiju and all this stuff,
Mhm.
like I wanted to write about some of these other creatures,
Mhm.
have profound qualities that we might not observe in the everyday. So,
Mhm.
but I'm also aware that there are some of them that I don't want to write about because it
Mhm.
would be appropriation,
Yeah.
culturally. So I'm always trying to navigate that too. And it's good to be aware because I do feel like, we need people with own voices to write their stories about,
Yeah,
you know, their beliefs and their
yeah.
cultures and their
And
myths.
my assumption also is that, you know, not only are they the ones who should be writing it, but they will do a better job because it's from their culture and their knowledge, and they'll have the
Right.
context. It's like when I was watching several years ago. So you know the Netflix series Kingdom, which is like the
Yes.
zombie,
Yeah.
the Korean zombie horror show that gave me nightmares. But um, several years ago when it first came out, I was seeing like Korean and Korean American and Korean Canadian friends talking about how different the English subtitles were from the actual spoken Korean, and how there's no way really to communicate the levels and depths of how people are addressing each other, particularly, you know, like especially like the commoners and the nobles and royalty. Um, just the enormous sphere of this can't fit into an English subtitle. Like
Yeah.
there's too many complexities.
Much
And
no.
I watched it a couple of years later, and I remember being angry that I couldn't get that from the subtitles, that they were seeing almost a completely different show
I
than
could,
I was
you know,
seeing
it's
because
version
I
of
had to
the book.
watch it with the English subtitles on.
Yeah.
And like, you know, if I had the full context of that, that would have made it so much better for me. But I
Right.
didn't, and I can't. So that's why I keep thinking own voices is has an inherent advantage in
Yes.
writing about this because they have the context, and we're coming to it with just our little ball of context from the outside. Like, oh, zombies are scary. Yes, they are.
Right. And I think like
Such a good show.
I love coming across own voices, you know, and helping uplift them. You know, like I
Mm-hmm.
recently interviewed Wole Talabi about the
Oh
South,
yeah, yeah.
you know, so that I love that stuff. And, you know, I feel
Mm-hmm.
it's not my job to own a piece of, you know,
Mm-hmm.
something I don't have that background and I don't have,
Mm-hmm.
I can only speak to it, you know, from the outside looking in. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I love listening and reading, learning about people's true experiences and
Mm-hmm.
cultural significance. So it's really wonderful. That's one of the things that I'm trying to champion more, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you know, and it's just better for all of us. Like
It's
everybody,
all better for all of us. Yeah, it's better for
everybody
the whole publishing ecosystem. We get better books.
exactly, and we get more
Yeah,
books. And
and we
so,
get more books.
you know,
Yeah.
everybody has, you know, it's a big tent. We should let everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But related to like, let's do some writing advice questions now. What I have to ask is the
Mm-hmm.
worst writing advice you've ever received.
Write what you know. And
Oh,
I
please.
remember, yeah, I remember seeing that very, very early on. And I disregarded it immediately. It's just, it's so bad. It's so limiting. Like
Right.
people take it so literally too, and they don't look past it. The only way I could see write what you know being a net benefit to a writer is if they stretch their minds a little bit and go, if you don't know something, then research it, then it will be what you know. So then you
Yes.
can write what you know.
Right. There's
But most people are just like, you know, well, I'm not even gonna try. And then you read their stories and they just feel very cramped, and you can feel that they want to stretch, but because they feel they don't know something and they didn't think to do some research on it, they don't.
yeah.
I want to see people stretch out to their full extent. I see this a lot in the escape pod slush pile. And part of it, of course, is because some people are trying to write a novel, but they're also trying to cram it into a short story, which is kind of the mark of a very new writer. But there's a lot of people where they have the idea and the short story is like 2,300 words. But if it was a 4,000 word story, it would have been better because at that length, it's just cramped.
Yeah.
It doesn't explore deeply or broadly the things that the person brought up that they thought were important to the story. And you can feel the importance, you can sense it, but they gave it short shrift.
Yeah.
And I hate seeing people cheat their own writing that way, you know?
Oh, yeah. That is frustrating. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Yeah, so I hate that advice. I hate
yeah.
it because people always take it wrong.
Yeah. And I do too. It's one of my least favorites as well for the
Yeah.
same reason.
And kill your darlings, which I also hate.
Yeah, exactly. I'm only going to do that if I know it's going to have incredible impact. You know,
Yeah.
that there has to be a reason to, you know, I don't
I,
just,
I I relocate my darlings generally,
yeah,
or I just And there's nothing I think that's so precious that it can't be killed. But for instance, with And What Can We Offer You Tonight, that's entirely darlings. If you've read the novella, it's completely self-indulgent. There's barely any plot. There's sentences that go on for an entire page. I was like, I don't care. Like, it's gonna sell or it's not gonna sell, big deal. And it's entirely darlings. It's 21,000 words of darlings that I refused to kill. I took nothing out of it that I didn't want to. My editor suggested 3 changes in it, and I studied them all, and he was like, okay.
Right on.
And then it won the Nebula and the World Fantasy Award.
Awesome.
So keep your darlings if your intuition's telling you to keep them, I think.
Yeah, I hard agree.
Yeah.
So I think that that's really good advice to writers starting out. Is there any other great advice that you'd like to pass on?
Oh, geez. At least in terms of, and this isn't writing advice, this is maybe more publishing advice, but if you're going to submit to short story venues, make sure you read the venue first. This is very common advice. Nobody takes it.
Yeah.
Nobody does. They just go onto Submissions Grinder or something, and they're like, my story is 5,000 words. I'll submit to this venue that's got, an opening for 5,000 word sci-fi short stories. Editors are very different. The voice and the vision and the vibe for each venue is very different. An escape pod story is going to feel and look different from like a Clarkesworld story, which is going to look different from like an Asimov story, because all those are different editors and their preferences historically have shaped the magazine. And if people aren't reading that, they're going to get bounced, not because their story isn't good, but because it's a bad fit. Reading lots of the desired venue is going to give you a better idea of fit.
I think that's excellent advice, and that I hope a lot of people take home.
I hope so, yeah. We get such good stories at Escape Pod sometimes that my other editors and I it kills us to turn them down, but we're like, this isn't the Escape Pod vibe.
Yeah, right.
Like, they should submit this to Analog.
Yeah.
Because it's an excellent story. Analog will probably buy it, but it's not our vibe.
Yeah, great advice. All right. Well, is there anything that I haven't asked that you'd like for readers to know?
Oh, geez. No, I don't think so. But please pre-order No One Will Come Back for Us. It's coming out in May. I'm excited. I'm actually having a live launch event, which not all my books have gotten because plague.
All right.
I hope people will be masking at this one because we're not really outdoors, but yeah, we'll see.
And where can everyone find, listed at the beginning, but again, where can everyone find you online?
I'm still on Twitter, which is terrible, at Premeesaurus. I'm also on Instagram at Premeesaurus, much less frequently. And my website, I try to keep relatively up to date-ish, PremeeMohamed.com.
Fantastic. Well, Premee, thank you so much for being on Sci-Fi Author Chat.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. This was fun.
I can't wait to get that collection. Woo!
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. Ad Astra.